I've been in here. Have I been here once? Once, I think once.
Semi-professional podcasting. We're not like York Valkyrie, where we've signed people up to professional contracts. This is semi-professional.
We haven't even signed people up to amateur contracts.
I mean, we have been. I mean, you can't even say we've been nominated for an award when you have to enter it yourself. That's not being nominated, is it? But
is that in Kazakhstan?
No, in Britain, we've been. No, we've entered British Sport some awards, best rugby podcast. So if we get to the shortlist, which there's a chance it could happen, maybe no one else enters, and then or
best rugby league podcast broadcast from upstairs at a bookshop.
So if all the other nominees are rugby union, then we could claim to be the best rugby league podcast, even if we're not. Because you can just write it write it in the magazine, Phil. Say we're the best podcast. Say we are the bestest podcast in rugby league.
But the Amazon book charts are like that. They just have rugby.
Don't mention that word.
Amazon.
Not in here.
No,
it's a good job.
Sorry, I didn't know.
I've got early. I didn't realise it was 5:59. Never mind. Welcome to 4020 Live, back in the studio, celebrating England's 2-0. But where's the shield? We should have a shield too.
That was an interesting shield, if that was what we walked past when he walked out, wasn't it?
Piece of plastic.
Yeah.
We've run out of metal. We sold it off for scrap.
Modern, I think they call it.
Modern art. Steve,
hello.
Mascord is here.
How are we? The only times I put gel in my hair these days at post 50s when I'm going on YouTube. So I actually just went to the pub.
I thought it was the cold.
Yeah, the cold, yeah. Because I'm frightened of the next hour. That's
Actually, your face is looking okay after what we heard about last week.
Yeah, but I'm still a bit. Nose is still a bit beaten up. Yeah. I stuck my hand up straight away. You've got to own it.
Why are you here, Steve? Why are you here?
Well, I'm covering the test series for NRL.com. It's been really good fun to be back reporting, doing all the stuff I used to do for several decades. And then 2 nights ago, when I was leaving the John Smith Stadium, the car broke down. So I didn't get towed. I had to wait about an hour, and then they put a charge into the battery, and then I had to just find somewhere to stay because it was a Saturday night. So I was back there this morning. And organising to get the car fixed. There's no point going back to London now, so I'm here for the week.
There's never any point going back to London, is there?
Well, it's different. It's like being in a different country. It is.
You know, Grand Tour of West Yorkshire?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm open to suggestions. If anyone's watching, they got any...
That's very dangerous.
Well, last night I was in Huddersfield, and I just got on Twitter and said, what pub should I go to? And I tried to go to as many of them as were suggested as possible.
Well, I was in a Huddersfield pub last night, so
it
wasn't in the town centre, but yeah, past me, of course.
You didn't see my tweet?
I didn't actually.
No. I think you would have. You probably wouldn't have invited me. But it was great. I was at the train station, and there was live music, and it was fantastic. Yeah, fantastic.
You got to see the statue of Harold Wilson?
Is that?
It's
just
Square.
Yeah.
Square. Yeah, I've seen it before. Yeah.
Huddersfield's most famous. Huddersfield's most famous specimens.
You know, I went into a pub called the Jules Verne, and I actually did Google to make sure he wasn't from Huddersfield.
And unfortunately, you couldn't go into the George Hotel and pay your respects to the greats,
but it's quite
the great men who.
I'm not bored of seeing it anymore. You know what I mean? Like I'm probably bored of the Opera House because I've been there so many times. But
I assume you mean Sydney Opera House rather than Wakefield.
Or Huddersfield Opera.
The Huddersfield Opera House, yeah. The Huddersfield Harbour Bridge as well, and that was very impressive. But no, it looms pretty big in my kind of imagination. I obviously read about it a lot as a kid, growing up in Wollongong, and it is a shame that it's sort of boarded up, and it's special to me. I look at it when I walk past. I walk past 6 times in the last 48 hours, and I always have a bit of a look at it and have a think. So
kiss the blue plaque.
You can't get near it. You can't get near the blue plaque.
Is the boarded up state of the George Hotel a metaphor for rugby league, Phil? Deep philosophical conversations here.
Do you know, there were 2 performances this weekend which, if they don't reinvigorate what rugby league can do, I don't know what does. But the Gillaroos and the Ferns was just the most astonishing game. I mean, we were lucky enough to see their group fixture in the World Cup last year and said it probably doesn't get much better than this, and it at least equalled it. But also the Ukraine men and everything that country has been through, to go to Greece, and this isn't decrying the Greeks in any way, but they had 8 players that were there from Australia of heritage. For the Ukrainians to turn up and beat them twice in a weekend and win the Unity Cup, we should be revelling in all of these. These are stories that you can't buy, and I don't know if other sports have got them at the moment. And so we'll no doubt talk about England's slightly turgid victory over Tonga, but those 2 stories alone, we should be dancing in the streets.
I think it was the first loss for the Gillaroos in 7 years. Is that correct? Yeah.
15 games.
Yeah.
New Zealand now the lineal women's world champions.
But the standard was incredible. The defence from the Ferns was unbelievable, and to have the resilience to then go down the other end and score the winning try, you couldn't take your eyes off it. It was as good a sport as we'll see, as I think the wheelchair will be this weekend. And
now that is an enmity that you don't need to manufacture. I know you want to talk about it later, but I think I said somewhere.
I suggest we've got a plan.
I said somewhere that most of these kind of rivalries are manufactured by someone, usually the coach, sometimes the media, whatever. But in the case of France versus England in wheelchair rugby league, that's real. They actually hate each other's guts.
Well, there is a huge philosophical difference between them, which is a great starting point.
That documentary set it up perfectly, didn't it? It was absolutely incredible to watch. If people have not seen it, urge you to watch it.
I need to put it on BBC One or BBC Two before the game. I don't think they can because they're swearing in it after it's out.
But I was watching iPlayer. I haven't watched it yet, actually, so I'll have to.
You must watch it. Yeah.
Because if you think there's rivalry having not watched it, wait till you watch it and then you'll know there's real rivalry.
I'm not French, to quote Sam Bashara, in the edited version, if they put it on BBC Two. How's your weekend been, James? Whatever.
It was good, thanks. Yeah, I think I caught about 10 minutes, 10 minutes of the Gillaroos New Zealand.
I think it's England Tonga then.
Game. I know I watched the England Tonga game this week, and I watched it in far more detail than I did in Test 1, but I wish I hadn't.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're not a big fan of the plastic shield then?
Which was better, Benelin or watching England Tonga?
Well, I haven't taken Benelin, but maybe I should have done, or something.
Is it on the ban list?
It was an awful game, and I did watch some of the Test match one back again, conscious of the comments that were made about the refereeing and of the rucks, and I think they had some merit. Actually, Wolf, albeit I think we said last week they mentioned the press conference of being about a second difference. It wasn't a second; it was about a half a second difference.
And he changed, didn't he? In the press conference last week, he said it was 1 second in the second half, and then he already said it was half a second a week later. So
they presented on BBC pre-game this week the stats on ruck speed for England versus Tonga, and it was about a half a second difference, which is reasonably significant. But I just felt the rucks were really slow on Saturday, and it was a difficult job, I suppose. If the rucks had been managed in a certain way in game 1, it's difficult to then change it completely in game 2. But I think too much was let go in the ruck, which didn't contribute to a great game. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, that suddenly if you fix up the ruck, then it turns into a wonderful spectacle. I don't think it does, because I actually think you've got 2 coaches that are coaching in similar ways. Quite a physical approach to the game. There's not much flair, in my opinion. There were quite a number of mistakes, opportunities where England could have scored and didn't for a drop ball. And I'm not saying the weather probably didn't help the game, did it?
I think the other thing is that Christian Wolff slightly changed tack with his press conference after this week's game when he asked the referees, should England speed up or should we hold on for longer? And the answer was, you should hold on for longer. Well, if that's the instruction his team were given, probably...
I suspect that probably is the instruction was given, but it's a naive instruction to give, in my opinion.
It doesn't help spectacle.
I agree, and so for a referee going into game 2, you're almost on a hide into nothing, because if you spank the ruck early doors, you're going to end up with somebody in the bin, and either a team responds or they don't. And if they don't respond, you're in for a long day at the office. And do you want that live on BBC One? So I think, as a competition, I think Super League probably do need to look at ruck speed next year. But so much of it comes from the players and the coaches. It's not something that can be fixed by the referees on their own.
It's tied to the type of tackle, isn't it? So I think Ian Smith
there's a lot of catch and hold.
Yeah.
And I think they showed a few clips on pre-game on Saturday. Number of defenders in tackle. You're looking at probably more defenders in the tackle in the UK probably versus the NRL.
Yeah.
They want to catch, so hold the tackler in the air and then have time on the floor. But I think you also saw on the show some clips of some what we would term slow peels, where you get 3 men in a tackle, third man comes out, and then eventually the second man and the first man. And there's too much of a gap between each player coming out, and they should come out one after the other, really. Yeah, as I say, I would repeat, trying to fix it up in one game is difficult, and I think Chris Kendall's got a very difficult job come this weekend.
I know what the answer's going to be to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it was posed on Twitter. Would it make any difference having neutral officials? Or if we had an official from New Zealand, say, would they then referee the games to the standard we'd see in the NRL of ruck speed or whatever, as opposed to a Super League referee?
Well, if you're going to have a New Zealand referee, I'm not sure who that would be. Because...
Or wherever. Where does the pool of top
it would be an NRL referee.
From?
It would be an NRL referee.
Henry Parinaro.
Ashley Klein.
Yeah, Henry Parinaro.
I think that Phil Houston.
Yeah. So it would. Otherwise, it would be. I mean, I put a picture out on Saturday, didn't I? That it was 16 years almost to the day that I touched the first game between Great Britain and New Zealand. That's it. I have. Yes. I was only 24 then. I was 40. God. Certainly rugby league ages. No, but that was Tony Archer, and so in days gone by, it probably would have been the grand final referee or number 2 referee that would have come over and refereed the test.
So should we have sent
in previous years
our
we've
referees to the Pacific Championship and their referees over here?
Well, in an ideal world, yes, because in terms of referee development, it's such a fantastic opportunity for referees to go down under and referee in a different hemisphere under slightly different interpretations, but refereeing players really that you're less familiar with officials on the sideline that you're less familiar with, etc. I think that only helps you. I mean, Chris Kendall went down under for the Great Britain Test series, but I think when England travel down under, they'll probably take an English referee with them as part of that tournament. But I think in a previous Test series here, we've had I think Robert Hicks refereed game 1. Game 2 was refereed by. His name's just escaped me. Not Ashley Klein, the other referee that's refereed every major game. Sutton, yeah. Jerry Sutton refereed game 2, and I think it was then based on performance who refereed game 3. And you get into the politics as well, as Tonga would no doubt want to select an NRL referee, and Sean Way would no doubt want an English referee. And that's been forever and a day. I don't know. It's a bigger debate around how you try and police the rucks and tidying up the play of the ball and getting players to play the ball with the foot or making a better attempt is really where the game needs to go in this country. But you try and change a whole generation of players that have never done that. And that ain't going to happen overnight or in a matter of weeks. And what inevitably happens is referees will have a clamp down, as they say, early doors. And if they did clamp down in that area, the public will be up in arms, the coaches will be up in arms, and so inevitably referees back off.
In terms of, it wasn't really an outburst, but Sean Wayne unprovoked coming out in his press conference to deride everything that...
You were loving that, Steve, weren't you? I can see you in the corner, you were loving it.
This was meat and drink, but I mean, in all your experience of witnessing this, was that manufactured?
Yeah.
And who
it depends what you describe as manufacturing, but who benefits from it is Sean, because he gets his players fired up and he gets a win.
But there's only so many times you can circle the wagons and...
Yeah, but it's like when you've got games... So after a match, there might be bad blood, right? And you might say, I don't know, I mean... you might accuse the opposition of gamesmanship, or you might say that he almost eye-gouged me. If you say he did, it'll go before the disciplinary. Or you might... These sort of things. And then you play again in 10 weeks, right? But when it's a test series, all these little things are magnified. And all these... And because you get to even up, you get to square up 6 days later. So in my experience of covering like state of origin, for instance, you as a reporter, you're seizing on anything that might add a frisson to the interaction between the teams during the week. Might lead you to a story every day, and I recognise the great thing about that quote, which you do hear maybe 10 times a season. I don't feel like they won it. I feel like we lost it. If you want to take offence at that, you will. It's one of those great quotes where it's often tossed up harmlessly, particularly by a new captain, brand new captain, first press conference. He says that, and he's probably read it himself in the paper. He thinks it's an acceptable thing to say, and he doesn't realise that it can be used to motivate the other team. The thing about ruck speed, I was surprised Sean didn't go with the trying to influence the ref rather than disrespectful. I don't know how you say it's disrespectful to your team that the ruck was too slow when that's the referee's responsibility. So I would have gone for that. They're trying to influence the referee instead of the way he went with it. But I led my NRL.com match report on Adam Fanua-Blake's quote without comment. I didn't say it was insightful or anything, but I put it in the first part because I knew the potential it had to be used against them. So you talk about meat and drink, yeah. I mean, I'll take a game with good quotes over a game that's entertaining every day of the week.
So England won because of your quotes?
No, they didn't win. But no, they didn't. I'm not saying that. He said it in an open press conference. Yeah. He said it in an open press conference. Yeah, I know you can't pin a website to the dressing room wall, as far as I know. Yeah. Maybe there's a way to do it now, print it out or something.
I just think for Sean Wayne, they play 4 games in a year. So, it's just manna from heaven from him to try and manipulate something to create a story to try and fire up a group of players. Yeah. And it might not have worked for some, it probably worked for others.
It just felt a bit hollow.
I thought it did. I mean, particularly when his opening comment was, I don't know who he is.
Yeah.
What, you don't know who Christian Wolf is?
Yeah. Or Adam Fanua-Blake.
Or he said, he did okay when he was here. I think there's an enmity between them. I think there's an enmity between them that probably goes back to getting players released for mid-season camps. And we know that there are a lot of good St Helens players who haven't played the last 2 tournaments under Sean. So he didn't feel, if I'm going to use it, about feeding into the Wolves from a psychological point of view, from a publicity point of view. Sean would have felt no sense of conscience or reticence about doing an old-fashioned psych hatchet job on Christian Wolf, because I think they probably already had some enmity there. So he felt he was fair game.
I just felt that if that's what you need to psych your players up when you're that far into your reign as the England coach, that's you probably need more than that. And the way that Christian Wolf dismissed it almost with that,
a bat straighter than Jeffrey Boyd.
Well, it wasn't contemptuous. It was just that's up to him kind of thing. It just demeaned it to the point where is Sean building something up that isn't really there?
It's old-fashioned and it's cartoonish.
Yeah,
but we love it. I love it. I love it because it reminds me of my earliest days as a reporter, where people weren't so media trained, and they would sort of say whatever little thing annoyed them, they would say it, and they wouldn't, and then the opposition would cut it out of the paper, and then they put it in the dressing room wall, and guys who already just wanted a reason to get angrier and wanted more steam to come out their ears would just bite willingly, knowing, almost delude themselves and get angry about it. And I spoke to a bunch of players on the weekend about, does this still happen? And even like a winger like Matty Ashton, I said, we think this is a thing from the past. And he said, no, you have to have passion to play the game. It's not just technical, it's not just athletic. You've got to have a bit of emotion in your heart. And he said that this sort of stuff worked. It worked.
Well, we talk about the top 6 inch all the time, and that's where that comes from, in my opinion. It's not. Is it just enough to play for England? It should be, and it clearly was for, last week for Mikey Lewis, wasn't it? With his emotion in that interview post match. But it's worked, hasn't it? Ultimately, it's worked because they got a result.
Should they?
But has it worked, or were Tonga just not quite good enough on that?
I don't think
if they'd executed.
I would never say that something that was said at a press conference or the order in which it appeared in a match report influenced the result of a match. No way. It's just an extra little bit on top. It gave us something to write about. It helped the guys fire themselves up. It's not the reason they won. I think we're all kidding ourselves in the media if we think we can influence a result of a test match by writing some story. I'm sure it has happened over the years. I'm sure it has happened. But I don't think it happened on this occasion.
People will say there's been limited marketing of this test series, whatever people class as marketing. I've seen adverts up on Leeds Market on the radio. Perhaps you've heard them on this podcast. I don't know, but should we be leaning into it? Should the RFL be saying, "Go on, Sean, say some more things. Say you want to fight him."
Well, I go way back to 2006 when I went down under for the Great Britain Test Tri-Nations when Leon Price was quoted about the Bondi and Blackpool thing. That hit the pages. It was pages and pages and days after day on stuff like that. So
And Brian Noble did use that,
Yeah,
consciously use that.
Yeah. I mean, there was another instance where I think they were at the races in Melbourne, the Great Britain players, and one of the newspapers in Sydney said, "Oh, can I get a photo with this guy at the races?" And I think the media manager for Great Britain got the photo, and then the story appeared. They're the dirty dozen. They've all been either charged with a crime or they've all been in prison, and that was just a get square for not giving access the week before or something like that. And the media manager actually assisted unknowingly in the hatchet job. So it's a different. It's a different game in Australia, and it's very very different here with what ticks boxes, what gets in the paper, and a lot of it is not. I tried to explain to someone a couple of weeks ago. I said, if the story is about the structure and culture of rugby league, it's off limits for a national newspaper here. You don't write it because most of the audience won't understand it. So you've got to hit wider reference points that people will understand. Usually around football or about a soap or about, you know what I mean, a movie. But if it's just about, you say he's the best, he's the toughest player since Malcolm Reilly. In the Telegraph, most people don't know who Malcolm really was. So you can't write those stories. They're off limits. So I love the opportunity to be here and apply the sort of the rules of engagement that I have had for 40 years and to be able to cover a series here and still write for an Australian audience and use those reference points, I'm
just not sure that rivalry exists between the two nations at the moment. And if anybody had a right to be aggrieved, it would be Tonga for what happened to them in the World Cup semi-final in 2017. They could feel aggrieved, but it just felt a bit false sitting there, almost creating a rivalry that.
But next time they play, how do rivalries come about? They come about.
Are more people going to go on Saturday because they suddenly think that these two teams dislike each other?
Again, it goes back.
Tonga are too likeable.
It goes back to what I said. Those reference points don't really play in the public's minds here. They would play in Australia. There'd be 4 or 5 other reporters, and there'd be backgrounders about everything that Christian Wolff and Sean Wayne had said in the past. How many players from St Helens did not play for England while Christian Wolff was there, and there'd be these really deep backgrounders. There'd be unsourced stories. And Michael Karianis or one of those guys they talk to players off the record, and they'd give you a story about what happened at this meeting, and that is it awkward for Jack Wellesby to be in camp with someone, all this sort of stuff, and the narrative would be built. So it may not have an impact on the attendance this time, but you can bet it'll be brought up the next time they play. That's how the rivalries happen.
I can get it for when Samoa come over next year, because I think your starting point there is that World Cup semi-final last year, and I could understand if Sean Wayne was incredibly aggrieved at what happened in that game, and he's carrying that and he needs to get rid of it. But this felt a little bit.
You're all about the match, though. I'm all about personality. So I don't care about the occasion.
No.
If personal.
How many times can you go to that well?
Well, I've been doing it for 40 years. I mean.
No, but can
you
Sean
can't,
Wayne do that next year with Samoa?
Well, if it was Super League, you couldn't do week in, week out, could you? But when you're only playing for 3 or 4 games a year, then you only need to dip into it probably once during the Test series, and he's done it. They've won now 2 games.
Yeah.
The Test series is won. Whether they lose on, I'm not suggesting they will, but or he's bothered about the result. We want to win, and he summed it up in his post-match this week when he was talking about he wasn't bothered about the performance. He just wanted the win, which I kind of get, because you get the win and then you've won the series. But that surprised me coming from Sean Wayne. But I think he's just said it because I think you're right, Steve, that there's history there between the two of them that's probably going on behind the scenes. He clearly doesn't like Christian Wolff.
No. Well, doesn't like the fact that he was successful with St Helens.
Well, that, and I don't think it is manufactured from Sean Wayne's perspective. All he's bothered about is, can I use that to generate some angst in the camp to maybe add a 1% to the performance.
Yeah, would he have said that? Like if Mal Meninga and James Tedesco had made exactly the same comments after the first test, would Sean have been as willing to use it so blatantly? Maybe not, because the sympathy, wouldn't have been there. And he doesn't have a personal maybe he doesn't have a personal issue with those two guys. Like he feels like some sort of enmity towards Christian. But it's the voyeurism that gets people in, where they feel like people are revealing themselves and they don't want to, with their comments and the things they say, their body language. People, that's what people cling on to when someone is revealing part of themselves that they really didn't intend to because of their emotions. And that's what, and it doesn't matter whether it's a big game, World Cup semi-final, or whether it's a League One game. If someone is actually, because they're so emotional, they're revealing more about themselves than they want to, that engages people.
Yeah, I think there was more passion in the press conference afterwards than we saw in the 80 minutes on the pitch.
But you're still joking, Dad. I mean, at the end I said,
no.
how long since you've used this before? He says, I use it all the time.
Yeah. I don't think you can go back to that well that often.
Yeah.
And so I was a little bit surprised that having won the series 2-0, it became his almost his mission statement in the press. Before he'd even asked, who do you think had a good game today, it was like, we were disrespected.
He went on the TV and it was for a full-time interview where he wasn't asked about it.
Exactly
It was,
what I mean. Yeah.
It was up there as a high-profile live television interview. Where the guy wasn't asked about it, and he was a tirade, and that made it interesting to me. That I don't give a crap whether it's a good game or a bad game. For me, there was drama, there was pathos, there was anger, and for me that's a good day at work. You know what I mean? And no one actually got hurt. Yeah. No one really got hurt. Before you say, you're a vulture and you want people to be miserable, no one got hurt by this. Yeah. But it was interesting. It was entertaining.
So a bit like how in the boxing at the minute, all the attention's going towards these nonsense fights involving YouTubers and people off the street and whatever, and no one's talking about the purity of the real clashes between the proper pugilists. We need to sell the sizzle somehow to get people interested.
Well, it's called news, right? It's stuff that's new. There's boxing matches every weekend. There's rugby league games every weekend. You imagine sitting around in the 12th century, and for every day you said, "What new happened today? What new happened today?" And then you decide, I'm sick of saying that. I'll shorten it. What's the news? You know what I mean? It's just new stuff, and that was new. That was new. And I'm, like I said, there's a rugby. I can be within myself. A purist, and I can love certain types of rugby league games if I'm in a certain mood and different coaching styles. But I don't think the reader cares about that, and I won't force that upon the reader. That's just my own personal interest sometimes. The reader wants something that's new, that's different to all the other things that are trying to get their attention,
I like it when... I wonder what the scrums were like in the 12th century. They were right mess. I like it when coaches and players comment on journalists when they walk past them. I think that's always... It was good to see John Davison there, though. This is Matthew. Steve talks about people letting parts of themselves slip. Phil appears to me not to like Sean Wayne. Phil, we're in the same building as him tomorrow.
I don't like or dislike him, man. I just thought it was a very interesting tactic.
He might get thrown out.
That's a mismatch if ever I've seen him, me and Sean Wayne. No, I think you can question sometimes the philosophy of his coaching, and I did think it was a really strange thing to say that it was only about the winning. I did. Because again, as coach of England, he also has a responsibility to make sure that the style of play is entertaining, that more people will go to the games as a result of that style of play. I mean, he was very successful at Wigan, but ultimately it wasn't deemed to be entertaining enough for him to retain his job. They wanted to still be successful, but they needed to move in a slightly different direction to get more people back. And I don't particularly want to see that with England, because we all love international rugby league. It's one of the reasons that we've even got to know each other. That dimension of the sport, it to me should be elevated right to the base. That's why I've been knocked out with some of the things that have been coming in from around Europe and the Southern Hemisphere this week. It's a different level to your weekly competition, and it's incredibly uplifting. And I do think that the coach has a bit of a responsibility to make sure that the product that we see brings more and more eyes to it. So it's not whether I like him or not. I don't have a feeling either way. It's more to do with the fact that I just wish that England were a little bit more entertaining under his watch.
I find him like an absolutely intriguing
But you
character.
You
Absolutely
can't
intriguing.
ignore him. He is. Well, as soon as he walks in a room, he's fascinating
Yeah,
and intimidating
and
at the same time.
and I don't think he's been properly like profiled in that. I think if you hit him with certain key questions about certain situations and personalities, I think he'd give you an honest answer that would complete the picture of him, which is currently not complete. The public picture of him, I think you could pin him down on certain things and you'd learn a lot more about him,
And I think he's another of these coaches that has the admiration and respect of the players that he coaches, and that's all he needs.
Yeah.
He doesn't need affirmation from a group of people sat round here, whether we like him or not. What
Yeah.
he needs is to walk into a room with a mixed bag of players that he doesn't get to influence that often, and they go, whatever you say, that's fine by me, boss.
Yeah.
And I think he does have that.
Yeah. Christian is more a kind of military man, straight up and down. And again, I think there's probably something below the surface there, but he deliberately has a persona. Like Christian will go and shake the hands of everyone in a room.
Yes.
And
In fact, he did.
He shook my hand.
He
Yeah,
will.
I'm just-
But he'll stick around long enough to be polite, and he'll go and shake the next hand. And he's just a very precise person. I'm sure he's never not made his bed any morning in his entire life. I'm sure his car. I mean, I heard a story. Todd Carney said that when he was at his worst, Brian Smith took him to his car and said, "I bet your car's a mess." And sure enough, it was. I'm sure Christian's car is very, very neat, but I'm sure equally. There's something below the surface there. I mean, he used to be a cage fighter called Afro Savage. You know what I mean? So that's interesting. So I'm sure there's. But he wouldn't give up as much as Sean would with certain questions.
So what you're saying is going back to the YouTube and the boxing. We need to get Sean Wayne
Exactly.
and Christian
Well,
Wolf
In a cage.
in a cage or a ring.
I did say if
I
the
wouldn't be
series
too-
had been tied after the third test, because it is possible.
I wouldn't be
It's not
taking on
now.
Afro Savage.
That should have been the decider.
I reckon you could get a bigger crowd than
Yeah.
we got. Honestly.
Well,
Stick a ring in the centre of Headingley. So the match is secondary.
I can't remember because I don't want to name the guest just in case they didn't say it on the podcast last year. But on our library tour, one of our guests mentioned the fact that I don't know if he'd been offered a fight with Christian Wolf or Christian Wolf was offering to fight him. But I need to find that clip and see if he did say it, and then I'll do one of those videos like that. Yeah, I thought he said it on the podcast, but I'll check and I'll find the clip later. Is there anything to say about the game itself? Because it wasn't. It was just a game of rugby. Like you can. I turned to Phil just before the start when the teams came out and got the anthems and everything. Everyone's lined up, blah blah blah. It didn't feel special, in a strange way. It felt like an international. And don't get me wrong. It felt like Great New England France at Warrington earlier in the year, but it didn't feel special. And for something that only happens 4 times a year, unfortunately, we need to make it special.
I know, and I was trying to work it out. I thought, well, down under we've now got this competition, haven't we? So they're playing for a cup. Does that make it any more special? I'm not sure it does. But if this was the Ashes tour, the stadiums will be packed.
And
Because
there'll be different stadiums.
Well, they would be, but that's because we've not seen that, and there's so much history to that rivalry. And just going back to your point earlier on, it's a new rivalry, I guess. Maybe a hang up from 2017 World Cup semi-final, but that's actually quite a long time ago, and it was a one-off game. But if this was the Ashes, I reckon we'd probably have 40,000 stadiums, and it'd be full because I can't even remember the last time Australia toured here on a Test series.
I think you were a ball boy, I think. Part of the problem is
Don't mention ball boys around.
I remember going to
No.
watch, but I can't literally. You'd have to work out what year it is. It's that long ago, and the sparsity of that fixture. I think I saw a tweet this weekend about the NFL. I don't follow the NFL, but what was the game? I think I saw you tweet about. They've not played each other for 4 years.
4 years, yeah, and yet they're in the same city.
Yeah.
So imagine the excitement and the clamour for tickets when that fixture comes around. But I think you're right. What it's missing is some star names on both sides, which is always going to happen at the end of a long and really tough season. But we needed Jason Taumalola leading out Tonga. And we needed a couple more of the players that Sean Wayne wanted to pick, from Wigan, from Catalan, from St Helens, who we've had denied us this season, which taken a little of the edge off it, I think.
It's like I think internationals for all the work that's been done to bring it back, and I think it is on a bit of an upswing again. I remember that when you got picked in a rep team, you had to show up. You stripped your undies, lay on a bench like this, and the doctor lifts your leg up for the cameras, and then you're either in or you're out. You couldn't just ring up and say, I'm no good. Your club couldn't just ring up and say, he's no good, he's not coming.
What was he checking for when he was lifting your leg up?
Yeah. Well, I went to a Queensland press conference once, and one of the reporters stripped down to his undies.
Was he declared fit?
He was an FM radio reporter.
It's not the YouTube investigation.
Of course it's radio.
Yeah, but you know, so now there's this negotiation that goes on where the clubs kind of go, you can have him and him, but you can't have him. And you know, and you got guys like, you come up with the injury. He suffered it in May. It's like, well, we didn't tell you, but he's been playing with 2 broken legs and 2 broken arms for 4 months. Yeah. You know, we kept it quiet, but his head actually fell up and got.
That's always happened, though. Yeah. I mean, I know of a player that probably would have played, certainly in the squad last year for the World Cup, that more or less just decided that he didn't want to take part in the World Cup, so he didn't think England were going to win. And yeah, he did have an injury, but he could have worked through the injury to play. Do you know what I mean? And players and certainly clubs take the view, well, what do I get from it?
Yeah.
What do we get from it as a club? He's only likely to get a further injury or make the injury worse, and it delays possible surgery.
So now it's
pre-season.
It's just kind of it's like these teams are massaged into existence by diplomacy, you know, now, and I don't know how we're going to have it go back to I don't think it'll ever go back to the way it was, because the players are all full time. They paid a lot of money by their clubs, and it's kind of like, okay, you can't have him this year. You can have him next year. You can have him this year. You know, and
but does that not come back to the power of the players and what's gone on, the bargaining agreement down under? And I read something about the payment to the England players and Tonga players is far lower than it is to those players that are taking part in the tournament. Well, I'm suggesting probably Australia and New Zealand in particular.
Yeah, but Australians get paid a lot more than like Fiji and PNG and those guys. So it was supposed to be addressed in the CBA, but the issue was that the players wanted the money. The players wanted the money to come out of the funds from the actual tournaments, and the NRL were trying to tell the players, they lose money. You'd be giving us money if you do it that way. You'd have to pay us to play, you know. Yeah. So I don't think that got resolved, and we had this. I mean, people over here have said to me, you know, in positions of responsibility, the Aussies wrecked it by paying players so much to play for Australia and New South Wales and Queensland, because even in football here, the guys get nominal amounts of money to represent their country, and now rugby league is like suddenly, because the Aussies have set this level. The players here expect to be paid, and the game, you know, the game can't afford it. So, you know, I don't know the NRL. If the NRL the NRL's running this tournament in Southern Hemisphere now. The only way we could get that consistency is if they just run all international.
Well, I mean, according to the press, it looked like the NRL's running America. Peter Verlander is in the White House. He's running the whole world, the free world.
Yes,
he's Peter Verlander.
It's in trouble. I think the other thing about all of that is it goes back to the perennial question over here that we play too many games.
Yeah.
So once you get to this international series, when you've had so many league games, you've had a cup competition as well, you've had the playoffs, how many players literally are fit to be playing in it? But if, for example, IMG want to elevate the international part of the game, which I think they do, and they did make that clear when they first told us what their plans for the sport were, that is contingent upon playing less league matches, which is why one of the reasons why they wanted to drop loop fixtures and Magic Weekend. The fact that we haven't been able to do that does have an impact on the international game, but going back to what would make it feel special is for it to be totally and utterly, you know, that element of rarity and excitement that you were talking about with the NFL is you've got to see your star players when they come over, because it's no doubt you'll say you tweeted the programme from 41 years ago when the Invincibles came over, and
was that 41?
41 years ago today was the Boothbury Park Test.
Oh my God!
So I wasn't born.
Yes,
1982 was it?
Steve and I were there.
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
Well, you weren't there.
I was sitting up at home in Windang taping
Right,
it.
all right. I was.
I've
But-
still got the VHS tape, actually.
But that wasn't. I've got it on Betamax. But that was a moment that the world of rugby league changed, and I've never been in a crowd where we were getting this exhibition, but the crowd were hushed.
Yeah.
Not because they didn't appreciate what they were seeing, they just didn't know how to take and compute what they were seeing.
Yeah.
And that's what you want when it comes around every 4 years. You want to be something where you're that young kid, maybe, you know, over here in Dewsbury, and you want to get in a car and go to Hull because you're going to see something.
The world has changed.
It has. But
like for
that's
start,
what-
we have 5 or 6 competitive countries. So, and we have TV, we have the internet, we have games streamed. How can there be mystery when a touring team arrives in 2023?
I think that there was.
We know all their stats. We know their post
But there was in
contact
the World
meters.
Cup. There is in World Cup challenges. There is in the World Cup because you're seeing people that you have seen on telly that you want to see. When Jonathan Thurston came over and played in a World Club Challenge over here, we knew all about him, but we couldn't wait to see him in our back garden.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling that I think we haven't quite got from this Test series.
I think there's been a lot of. It's been done frugally, I would say.
Understandably.
So the venues, the marketing, the lots of little things around the edge. You talk about player payments. There's probably a few other things as well. You know, it's been done quite frugally because that's the position the game is in. And you know, if they took a game to London and they took one, are we giving up on Newcastle, or they're coming back now? We can take events there again. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if we took a game to those 3 places, and spent money on stadia, which the game can't afford, then I think that would also add to the sense of occasion a bit as well. You'd be getting a different audience. You'd be getting a lot of. I think you'd be getting a lot of Antipodeans in the south would go to the game. I'm sure a lot of Tongans go to St Helens, but there's probably in other parts of the country that they'd be more amenable to going. So you kind of get if you play an international at a club venue, then you kind of get what you pay for, don't you? Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
How did they get that sound system into the stadium? And how does it never run out of battery? The Tongan fans. Unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
Tongan
yeah.
Centre.
Yeah.
All there in the red.
They were there
Big, massive
very early.
flags.
They're there very early too. Yeah. And again, that colour, you know, sometimes it's also about focus. So it's like, that was great last year. Maybe it doesn't play as well in the media 12 months later. We all saw it last year. So we're not going to see Tongan Santa front and centre again, 12 months later. But someone's got to come here and someone's got to play an international.
Apart from The Rock, who's Samoan, who can do it next year. That's the big question. Benzi's been on. Because I asked earlier, why didn't you go? Why didn't you go to Huddersfield? What's wrong with Huddersfield? Apart from all the things, I had other plans, he says, but would have considered it looked a completely different event compared to last Test series. I went to there and he showed us a picture of Huddersfield where it's full against New Zealand. Was that 2000? I'm doing it for Top Sports. 2017, 16?
Wouldn't have been
4 Nations
17,
or
because
something?
2018.
Oh,
they
yeah,
killed.
17 was the World Cup. 2018.
Oh yeah,
That
That's
was
right,
it.
yeah.
was that game.
But wasn't it Hull? Wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a whole...
was
Because I got
Liverpool.
Huddersfield.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, because I was doing all 3 for TalkSport because I got moved at Anfield because the New Zealand team were where the TalkSport ISDN point was, so that was good.
You weren't going to argue then.
No, and Hull, I got tea spilt on me by Radio Humberside. Defund the BBC.
Not that you've forgotten.
No. IMO, he says, there seems to be minimal effort from the RFL, no ref sponsor, no series sponsor, no effort in staging an quote-unquote event. It didn't feel like an event on
I don't think there's minimal effort. I think that's where we are as a sport at the moment. We were saying just before we came on, it's not that they've got £10 to spend on marketing and you can criticise how they've spent it. It's they owe £10.
But
So
you can.
they need to get some money into the sport.
You-
So they've gone for very safe locations with limited capacity that you technically don't need to market these games, because if rugby league fans don't know that they're on, there's not a lot more you can do. And
Yeah.
you're putting it in rugby league heartland areas.
But you can call it, the Morris Lindsay Shield or the
Yes.
Martin Marcella Cup or
And
something.
you should be able to.
You know what I mean?
But you should be able to get a sponsor for this 3-match series.
Yeah, and just because the money doesn't come in doesn't mean that you can't do those little prestige things that maybe don't have an impact this series. But, next series, they do. Name it after someone. I suggested. I think Colin Love deserves a lot of credit with what he did with the Sevens. The Sevens all those years. All those countries play rugby league because of what he did, and obviously one day we're going to have something named after Morris, and I guess it's just a matter of finding the right property. The player of the series, it costs no money to have.
We haven't named the coach of the year
Had
trophy.
the Richard
after Roy
Shaw-Wright
Francis.
medal for the player of the series.
Brilliant.
It costs no money.
Get that sorted. Roy Francis, there's still this snapshot for him. Everyone knows about his great history now because it's been spoken about for the last few years. They don't name the coach of the year after him. So we just have this reticence of naming anyone after anything, apart from when we shouldn't do, and then we do.
I think if you work at the RFL though, because they're so under resourced and there's not so much money coming in, it becomes a case of time allocation. So it was a luxury for me to get here at 5 and then be able to go over the road and have half a pint. If I worked at the RFL, I wouldn't have time to do that. So to ring around and get people to approve the player of the series and everyone's on board and then sign off and then get the medal struck when you're actually just flat out trying to sell tickets. That I can, if you put yourself in their position, it's not the things that they don't do. It's choosing it's prioritising the things that must be done.
Where are the players this week and last week and week 1? Where are they? They're not on TV. They're not turning up on This Morning or whatever. They're not on local radio promoting the ticket
because
sales.
the media also has an issue now. People who work at newspapers now don't have time to go to press conferences. They can't go out on jobs. They're too busy churning out stories on the computer there. So if I'm one of only 2 sports writers at Wigan Today or whatever, I actually don't have time to go to media conferences anymore.
But I'm going to send someone to you. I'm going to send someone to your radio station to come on your show. And
there was no. So I went to the Tongan captain's run. There was a former All Black there. There was a NRL talent scout. The BBC said they were going to go and didn't. And they asked Tonga, who are you going to put up? And they said, you can have anyone you like. You're the rights holder. Talk to anyone you like. So there isn't the interest. It's like, don't come. Don't come to our radio station. I'm not going to open the door for you. That's. So
does that mean I should go to the captain's run whenever it is, and I don't want to say where it is because people might turn up then?
Just interestingly, from a media perspective, last game 1 it was on BBC Radio Merseyside. So I jumped in the car and I thought, I wonder if it's on local radio. And I couldn't see it on a BBC local radio station, so I thought it might have been on Radio Leeds, but it wasn't.
That's the lack of joined up thinking of. But then why
it wasn't on radio?
But why should it have been on radio?
And I appreciate it's on the BBC One, so if it's on BBC One, then why do we need BBC? Then need to spend money put it on the radio?
On Fine Line.
Yeah, Talk Sport,
but no live
Don't forget Talk Sport. Don't be like the RFL email that time.
Everyone's just time poor. The people in the media are time poor. The people at the RFL are time poor. The only people who aren't are really the players sitting around a hotel between training sessions. But no one's got time to talk to them.
But then here's the thing. So last week, great social media from Wigan. Here's the England team training, and here's a load of Wigan kids get to meet them.
Yep.
Test match isn't in Wigan. Test match is in Huddersfield. Test match this week's in Leeds. First test in St Helens. Where are the players there? And again, it's easy for me to sit here. I can say whatever I want and just say we should do this.
Neither team.
And I've got no.
Neither team wanted to travel to Huddersfield to do a captain's run at Huddersfield. They both had.
Well, that's crap, isn't it?
Yeah, they both had their captain's runs on the other side of the Pennine. So if the team doesn't want to show up, why do you expect fans to?
So I'm the local TV station for Yorkshire, and I'm based in Leeds, so I can pop to Huddersfield. That's fine. Just down and speak to Sean Wayne and speak to whoever's local, Tom Johnson or whatever. But I'm not incentivised to do that because I have to go over to Wigan to do it. Which might, if someone comes on my local TV news program, it might sell 3 tickets or whatever. I don't know. It might not. But I'll have done something. I'll have tried something. Where are all the players this week? Are they going to be in Leeds? It's half term in Leeds. Kids around everywhere. Go sign some balls or whatever.
So you guys were at the game, but were there lots of school children there? Did there appear to be sort of amateur clubs sort of in attendance where they'd done ticket sales to with a coach trip and stuff like that? That's what they used to do.
I
don't know.
I mean, I think there's an issue with taking a test match to Huddersfield because you go into a club that has one of the lowest bases of season ticket holders. So, there isn't an instant, right, there's a core of people there, we can email. And if, let's say, and I have no idea how many season ticket holders Huddersfield have, but let's say they have 4,000, and let's say they all went, you're still going to have to work to get up to 11 as we did, and you're taking it to a place where the demand isn't quite there.
Yeah.
Like, we're already hearing that Leeds is getting the highest attendance of the series, even though the series, well, you know, they get 15,000 there, and their average season ticket holders are 9,000. So the proportion that you need there is slightly less. Huddersfield is a strange location for International Rugby League at the moment.
Obviously, they get it the place quite cheap, but I guess the thinking is if we keep our cost base low, we can get through and still be able to afford to have Samoa here next year. If we take a risk with our cost base and then we fail and we still get 11 whatever thousand, maybe we can't afford to have Samoa here next year.
Would it have been a risk to take it down the road to Doncaster?
Yeah, I don't know.
But your argument there about
the cost of using the stadium.
No season ticket holders. What's the season ticket holders at Doncaster?
But I think the
Carl Hall has been everywhere promoted.
The thing about that is you've got a council that's going to get behind it because they're really behind.
I did 2 games at Doncaster last year and they were really poorly attended.
But the World Challenge Cup semi-finals.
Yeah, granted, but they've not done semi-finals for the Challenge Cup now for some time.
I mean, the thing is, like, what I've always said is that, you know, in World Cups, we shop around and we get councils on board and we get them to bid for events. And then I guess in some instances we let them down. They don't want to come back the following because it doesn't generate the commercial activity that they thought they were signing up for. But if we were joined up, we would say to a local council, we'll give you a pre-season friendly this year, see how you go. Mm-hmm. And then the next year we'll give you a Super League game, and then the next year we'll give you a test match. And so their expectations aren't huge to start with. Their expectations start off small. It's like we have to invest if we're going to have, you know, Hull playing Cass in a pre-season game. We know it's only going to get a few thousand people, but we might get a test match if we put some time into it. But unfortunately, Rugby League, and even in the Southern Hemisphere, we all the different bodies almost white ant each other. They try to get under each other to try to get that sort of council dollar, that sponsorship dollar, and they don't work together to incentivise so that you start with a small event, you then get a medium event, and then if you do well, you get a big event. We should
constantly build on stuff, and we mentioned this last week about the lack of commerciality on this test series, and that, you know, you had a group of probably a lot of which were new commercial sponsors for the World Cup, none of which appear to be involved in this test series.
Because all the people who worked at the World Cup are no longer in the game.
And we don't know what the value that they're asking for either.
Yeah.
You said the players play too many games. There are too many games. And C has pointed this out. I attended every game my team plays, home, away and abroad. Also watched 99% of Sky games. I simply can't be bothered watching any more rugby for a while. Nice having a break from it.
And that's the attitude in Sydney. That's why there's nothing...
That's what I felt like after the World Cup last year. I just thought, I've had enough rugby now. Mm-hmm. It was great. Is there a problem now that not enough people care to pay to attend international fixtures? And apart from England and Australia, which as we assume would sell out in an instant or whatever, but not enough people are that bothered enough to see.
I just think we need to be better. I think that's part of the issue with the Australians up until 2025 not wanting to play us. I think, you know, you have to have the basis of it has to be competitive. And
but these have been close games.
We need to look at... No, but
4 points, 10 points, they're not floggers.
Yeah, and I think some people, if they had the chance to buy tickets again and have missed this series, would now buy them because they've enjoyed the closeness of the games. But International Rugby League itself, the disparity between the Southern Hemisphere and the Northern Hemisphere has not been addressed for 50 years. And one of the reasons is because we play too many games. And every time we have an inquiry into why is England not competitive, or Great Britain, or why the Northern Hemisphere nations not able to generate enough interest in international rugby league, it's because we need to be better at it.
Yeah, but also, like, there hasn't been much, and I know there hasn't been much done to support the other Northern Hemisphere countries. And, you know, like, the RFL is supposed to be the governing body for rugby league in the United Kingdom. Okay, Rugby League Ireland can take Northern Ireland, so that's a little less work.
Is it though? Is it not just for England?
No.
Scotland and Wales as well.
Yeah, it's a British government that gives them funding, not the
so why does Wales Rugby League and Scotland Rugby League exist?
Well, theoretically, because they have domestic competitions, and they can then get funding from their relative equivalent of what Sport England is, but those domestic competitions aren't particularly supported, and those international nations don't have the funds to necessarily support.
Yeah, like so if, like, basically 1980, New South Wales helped out Queensland by giving them a bunch of players back so that make these games competitive. And now we have State of Origin. Now, if the RFL wanted to do something similar for, say, Wales or Ireland by giving them players who are eligible,
like Toby King,
and so many players like that, then they could suddenly have opposition that you don't have to put up in a hotel for a month. And they don't have to fly over here and give appearance money and blah 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 blah. And the RFL's aim is always England. England Knights takes players off the other home nations, and so what you're doing is creating a situation where you're keeping your closest opposition 20,000 miles away. And trying to help the French is great, and a lot has been done there. But it seems to be it's such a long tail of, there aren't a bunch of French players where you could say, okay, put them in a team tomorrow, the best possible people with Gaelic names, and they would compete with England. But if you put the best players who are eligible for Ireland or Wales together, after 3 or 4 seasons, even if they all speak with northern accents, within 3 or 4 seasons, they could probably jag an upset. You know what I mean? So I really think I think that is the RFL maybe over the last 20 years digging their own hole by neglecting the other home nations.
Well, the last crowd of note at the McAlpine Stadium was 2013 World Cup when England played Ireland. In a game that was almost a foregone conclusion in terms of who was going to win it.
Yeah.
But it had that resonance around it.
The other big issue we've got is England were one of the few things that we could rely on at the World Cup last year to be successful is attendances at England games. So 12 months later, England outside of that competition aren't the draw card they were. And you can only ask the people watching why. They just feel there isn't a narrative. That's
what I was trying to think about the weekend. So if it was an Ashes series, I think there would be a crowd. If it was a cup competition, would that make it more interesting? I don't think it would, but it worked because it was the World Cup and there was the possibility that England could win the World Cup. That's why I think people bought into it, albeit not in the same number as they did in 2013.
If it was a tied series now, you would be, Leeds is already going to be successful. I think it would be really, really successful if the series was tied. I mean, the first time a touring team came here, I'm sure people, when Albert Baskerville and his mates arrived in 1907, I'm sure people were like, well, this newfangled thing won't catch on. I don't want to go watch them,
It's on Betamax as well.
But then the other advantage we mentioned last week is that they know they're playing Samoa next year. So one would imagine that you can now... I was going to use the phrase showcase, it's probably not the right phrase to use, but you should be going to commercial partners to say, we have this tournament next year in 12 months' time, this is what we're delivering at the moment, are you interested in getting on board? They've got plenty of time, so there should be no reason why they can't get people on board.
I think it's a really, really tough market, and without the money to pocket from this, to then invest in next year's series, it's almost like you're starting from scratch again.
At least we're trying to build up the tier 2 nations, if you will, and not keeping them at arm's length like others. Carson feels like he's watching too many games. Well, we need to take obviously England to the Netherlands, where they had that record crowd against Germany the other week.
Five wins in a row.
There you go.
The Netherlands.
Going to win the Golden Boot. What's he called? Shoemaker? Was he going to get his Golden? We've got to give him back. These are the campaigns we've got. Golden Boot for him.
Shonamaka.
Medals. Thank you. Medals for the Leeds Rhinos League Leaders Shield winners, which I think they asked Tom Halliwell tomorrow about it. Have you got has given you medals? And whatever other campaigns we've got. Why were water carriers wearing yellow shirts, Jim? I know it's not your fault. It's stupid. Couldn't tell the difference between Jack Smith and these water carriers. On the pitch all the time.
Well, water carriers usually wear blue. So yellow is usually the trainer.
The yellow people.
Yeah, well, that's what they always wear, isn't it? Physio's orange, yellow's the trainer,
why
red's the doctor.
Why don't we do the Dave Hadfield medal for the player of the series if they don't do one?
Well, just ourselves.
Yeah, we can vote. We'll get the viewers to vote.
Melt down some caramel wafers wrappers into some kind of shield. Yeah.
What would the statue of the Dave Hadfield medal be? It'd be like a pint.
A
beard
and a pint.
I'm sure we can get a pint glass engraved, can't we? Yeah. We'll do that. We'll do that after the final test next week. We'll get people to
get people to come in. Yeah, the day first, series, and from now on, if there's a home international series with no official, you've heard it here first. no official player of the series, then we'll do
Well,
it.
just do it anyway. But what you
I just walk in here once every 5 years, and I
only
Present the bearded mug.
only nominate people who play in England, whether they're Tonga or English, because then we can give them the trophy. Because we can't get to Australia.
no,
can't go.
No, you can give it to them before they leave. They'll be all on. They'll probably be all
we've
over
got to
in that
get
pub.
edged.
They'll be next Sunday. They'll be all over in the pub, the Tongans, before they go home. Go over there and give them their trophy.
We'll be at the Wheelchair International first, and then it'll come.
As Torsten points out, is Germany-Poland this weekend in Berlin. This is not GB News, and I'm not John Cleese, so we'll just leave it at that. Is that all the Test match stuff done from Saturday?
The Test match here, yeah. There were innumerable Test matches over the weekend, but
Sorry, what's they called now? Something international matches. They're not called Tests.
senior international.
Senior international match.
Frustration was that you couldn't actually watch us. Well, I couldn't actually watch Australia and New Zealand because it was on the red button.
That was bizarre.
Yeah.
That was bizarre.
And it didn't work. Apparently, it didn't work properly initially.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
Obviously,
But they
No.
do play again this weekend in the final.
But so is it something like 5 o'clock in the morning now?
yeah, 4 o'clock.
You'll be up.
I definitely won't be up.
Is that going to be live, or are they going to bump it off for some more golf or something? Hey, golf. Who watches golf?
I don't know. You can watch PNG and Fiji
Well, they got a big
in the
crowd,
final.
you say?
In the final of their bowl competition.
I mean,
So
speaking
whoever
of
wins that gets promoted into the competition for next year, is it? Is that how it works?
Tonga
Is it-
returns.
Tonga come back and replace Samoa.
Tonga replaced them. Yeah.
Oh, is that how
And
it
the
works?
bowl will be played in Fiji and not PNG, is I believe the plan.
Okay.
It's interesting. And Christian said it on the weekend because the Fijians. My good friend our good friend Brad Walter has been up there for the whole month. NRL.com, and he said that there's a lot of reluctance to go to New Guinea but he's loved it. You know, Brad.
I would love
having a
to
few
go.
beers with the refs
Oh,
and
yeah.
having a great time. But he said it's been a really, really good experience. But they said if PNG had won at the weekend, which they didn't, a really surprising result, and then they won again this week, that they would have overtaken Tonga in the rankings, would they? Because
No,
they
I
said
think they would have overtaken Fiji.
PNG would have overtaken
Yeah.
Fiji.
I don't think I don't think they're close enough to
Okay.
to overtake Tonga.
Okay.
But they certainly can overtake somebody. So.
And Christian said that we should get more credit for playing a Tier 1 nation.
Yes, and
And
that's
losing.
how the world rankings work.
Yeah, okay.
There's a factor into it. If it's a World Cup game, it's worth more than. So the Netherlands will be going up because they played 5 internationals and they've won them, but they clearly won't be on the same level as a Fiji and a PNG.
The one thing,
Because of the nations that they played.
the one thing that I was thinking, it must be expensive to give teams a bye because you've still got to put them up in the hotel for 2 weeks, and also there's I guess not in New Guinea where you can't go out, but in other parts of the world there's a danger on the spare weekend of guys getting up to mischief and stuff. So why not have 2 levels of 4 and bring a team from the Northern Hemisphere like Ireland, Scotland,
That's exactly
France,
what. Yeah.
you know,
Wales.
and let the
Play-
NRL's
play in the
got.
bowl.
I mean, the NRL's got money to burn. Why not do that?
Well, we'll have a
You couldn't
Wales
call it
as
the
well.
Pacific Championship then.
No, with guests.
Well,
Pacific Champions,
Wales.
Ireland.
Yeah.
Old
No,
South
with an
Wales.
R, not an S. Yeah.
Old South Wales. There you go. They're in.
Old South Wales. Yeah.
But I suppose if you select a squad that's big enough, you play players that have not played in your other games. If you're in New Zealand or PNG or whoever.
But there isn't a game. They don't have a game for one weekend because it's a try tournament.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the players that have not played in the other games,
Yeah.
they get a run out against
Yeah.
another team.
Yeah, but again, we're talking about you got to play for something or no one's interested.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
What's more interesting what's more easy to work out, the International Rugby League World Rankings or the IMG grading scale? Do we actually want to talk about IMG? Because I'm just... I read people last week, as soon as the numbers came, I'm like, I don't care. I can't influence it. It's happening. I'm sick of clubs releasing really badly worded statements.
Oh, some of them are illiterate. I don't want to name any, but,
Well, no, but
I saw one
listen,
I think it was 55 words in the sentence. It was like,
I think we both read the same one.
Well, I've read 2 today, and neither of them were terribly well written.
I have to say that London were commendable in their
Yeah, they
reaction
were,
because the big story was London are going to get promoted and instantly relegated, and the likelihood is they will. I mean, theoretically, they could garner enough points in 2024 to be a top 12 club, but I don't know what they're going to have to do to go from 24th to 12th.
Some other clubs are going to have to go real
Yeah,
Buy some
bad.
LED
yeah,
lights,
they're going to have some huge investment.
new sound
and-
system.
So the question then, obviously, that most people have raised is what is the point of having grading if you're going to promote a team and they're immediately going to be relegated? And what incentive is there for them? And then does that devalue the competition in 2024 because there's a lame duck in it before you even start. But I thought their response was incredibly positive and almost gave backing to the whole system, that we just need to sit back and say, well, if they're prepared to accept that, then we perhaps should be as well, rather than we've been disadvantaged by this, therefore the whole system is flawed. They have taken it upon themselves to be better in every aspect of their club, and surely that's what grading is about.
I agree, all that. My concern is, fast forward 12 months, and there's a press release saying these are the teams that are going to take part in the Super League. How do we announce that? Like, everybody's waiting to know who's going to play in Super League, who's going to play in the Championship.
It's like Premier League darts. Barry Hearn comes on and tells us at the end.
Yeah, the
Tony
grand
Sutton
final.
comes on.
We've played the grand finals,
Red.
we've done all that.
Won by London
but
Broncos.
won by London Broncos. And then next week, they're playing in the Championship. That's the bit I just can't get my head around.
But it's not about 2025, it's about long term.
Yeah.
I think that's what David Hughes' statement was. I think they do need to improve. I go to a lot of London games. I think it's great. It'll be Super League, 38 minutes walk from my front door every second week next year. But they don't have many fans, and they've got a lot of ground to make up. And the fact that you shouldn't... I obviously come from a background where you don't win your way... I come from a place where you don't win your way into a competition. You earn a spot through commercial reasons. You can win... You can win the New South Wales Cup or every year forever, and you still won't get promoted to the NRL.
It's the classic example.
Wentworthville, yeah.
Lewis Jones went there in the mid-60s. They won 5 consecutive championships, and Parramatta got the franchise.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't about how good they were on the field, it's what they could bring to the competition. And there's an element of realism in that, where rugby league is in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, which... There will always be flaws with any system, and there will always be people that are inconvenienced by the bringing in and calculation of a system. But if in the longer term, some of those who are currently being disadvantaged by it, I thought York gave a good statement about exactly where they sit at the moment and what they now need to do. Doncaster, in many respects, again a team that is seen to be progressive at the moment, are saying, we now know what the landscape is for us to be where we want to be. And it's not about us going and spending on a load of players that we probably can't afford for 1 year, which you might call the Featherstone model, and yet constantly then chasing economics rather than building a club that is sustainable in that top flight, which will bring in more commercials for everybody. That's the bit that probably wasn't said in the announcement of the grading. The idea is to get 12 Grade A clubs. They'll all be sufficiently competitive that you will have this uncertainty of outcome. More commercial people and broadcasting partners will then want to come on board and say, actually, we want a piece of this competition, and that's where everybody will benefit from. But that there has to be some inconvenience in the short term for some clubs, because that's the way it works. You got to start the process somewhere, and I got that. Castleford would be upset because they felt that their grading should have been slightly higher. But what you can't do is 10 minutes before...
It's not the BBC, I tell you what.
10 minutes before the official announcement about grading is due to come out, a club releases a statement saying, we got one of our gradings wrong, so we don't like what's going to be coming out in 10 minutes. The look that gives for the sport is really poor. And, fans will jump on to...
But that's going to happen. That's going to happen in future years. This is what I'm trying to get to. That's going to happen in future years. People are going to contest it.
It's not that they were contesting it, it's that
I know they weren't contesting.
There wasn't an embargo, but we all knew it was coming out at 10 o'clock. And at 10 to 10, to get a press release from a club saying, we've made a mistake in our calculation, it's not a great look. When you then say that mistake has been compounded by the RFL and so that, it's like, we haven't even had the gradings yet. That's where everybody's got to take a step back and say...
When they made their big announcement before the World Cup, I remember asking one of the guys, is it possible to win Super League and be relegated? And they said, well, maybe theoretically, but, And, it's just like... David Hughes, actually, people say, why should they bomber next year? I think they should actually go for broke, try and win the comp, and get relegated the next day.
Featherstone have released the whole squad, 17 players. That's a whole match day squad.
Featherstone have.
Has there been any exciting signings? Apart from Jermaine McGill, we're going away for, that's good. If we'd have signed him a couple of years ago, it'd be even better. I'm glad he's there because he comes across as a player who's experienced, but old, but also not going for a payday as some other players may have done at Wakefield in the past and at other clubs. So I'm glad to see him there, and it's good to see Hull released their kits last week. Their home shirt is black and white, and their away shirt is dark blue and white. So that's good. No kit clashes there. And Wakefield have released a special kit. I've got it here. It's exclusive to the podcast. I've got props because in addition to Darryl Powell, Michael Shenton joining. So to make them feel at home, this is the new kit. This year was a Leeds kit. This is like amber and black. So we've got the Wakefield badge on it.
What year is that from?
Well, it's Wakefield Rugby Union Club.
Oh, well, it's probably this year's Wakefield Rugby Union shirt.
Killed by the Bradford Bulls. Match worn shirt that's worth at least £3. So how did Hull get away with that kits? That's nonsense.
Well, maybe they can bring out 2 or 3 alternative kits.
So this weekend we have a triple header of Rugby League action in Leeds, starting with England women versus Wales women. Wales, who were, I mean, I've obviously not seen the game, but judging by the scoreline against France, 14-4, that seems a very creditable score, with where Wales are in their international journey and where France are. England are going to win, aren't they? I mean, we all know that on Saturday. It's going to be interesting to see how far away Wales are, because, again, we talk about building up the clubs around the countries around us in terms of the men's game. Got to do the same in the women's as well to have some meaningful competition, because try and find some games that will help us catch up with the Australians and New Zealanders in the future.
Well, Tom Brindle works at the RFL and coaches the Welsh women. So there you go. He's one guy at the RFL who's doing his bit.
I think that the great thing about the weekend is it brings back that World Cup feel. That we made a virtue, quite rightly, out of it being men, women and wheelchair over a weekend. They could all support each other. One event could roll into the next. The narrative for the media is that it doesn't stop when the England men come off the field against Tonga. It's we've actually got another probably more exciting game to look forward to because of all the storyline behind that. This is the first time that England and France have played each other at wheelchair since a rather notorious World Cup final.
We're the match officials.
Well, actually, we can't tell you, but we know.
I think I think this weekend is exciting from that, and maybe that's one of the reasons why people are buying tickets, because not only are they getting 2 games, women and men's at Headingley, but it feels a bit more like inculcating that spirit of the World Cup last year, which I think it did feel special and different. So I'm really looking forward to the weekend as well.
And now they're separating them out again, aren't they?
Yeah.
After the success of the biggest, bestest, most inclusivist the World Cup ever.
I think it's a really interesting one. If you knew there was commercial support out there for having rolling World Cups, I'd say yes. But the fact that we don't, and we don't know what broadcasters will come in, we don't know what hosts yet will come in, although apparently there has been a fair amount of interest in hosts that want to take World Cups, then yes, it might be worth doing to confirm the value of the sport. I think if you don't know that in advance and you're splitting up your USP, that's probably a dangerous route to go down.
Yeah, I mean, I recently caught up with Melinda Farrell, who used to work at Sky. She's a really good friend of mine. She worked at Sky for years and years under Neville Smith and that, and she does cricket now, and she just goes from tournament to tournament. She's at the World Cup in India. She stays in hotels for weeks, and she's constantly on the road. And I'm like, if we could have a World Cup every year, maybe I could kind of just float from country to country.
I could go from Vegas.
So I kind of selfishly think it's. I mean, we're so far from that, it's not funny, but I kind of selfishly think it. And then you would get what you have in the Olympics, Commonwealth Games, is people work in the media centres and they do all these jobs, and they just go from one tournament to the other. So maybe we wouldn't lose some people who know who sponsors, know councils, know how to sort of they make do all this work for rugby league and they lead the sport. And so I think having a World Cup, 3 out of 4 years or whatever, maybe we could sort of some of that corporate memory we may not lose it.
So looking forward to the weekend. And I think that game on Sunday is probably the one with the most riding on it, because obviously the England men's series is over. England Wales, you think is going to be a foregone conclusion in terms of the result. That's not to take anything away from Wales, but Sunday's game for a trophy which has got people's names on it.
I think the other thing about it is the venue as well. I think
first time ever.
If we're talking about you want to go somewhere that feels a little bit more prestigious, you're not we have had wheelchair internationals previously in the equivalent of sports halls, or we've had them in big venues where you're in the smallest part of that venue. You can't hide in the Leeds Arena.
Yeah.
The FD Arena is a very prestigious. Yeah, it won't be set out as if the 15,000 people are going to be in there. It'll be lit to whatever the crowd is.
Yeah.
But merely going there will feel a little bit special.
I'm looking forward to it. I've never been into that arena, so yeah.
Some of your favourite bands have played down
They're all too old.
there. No, that's they have.
But that arena's reasonably new, though, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, Jay McDonald's played there.
Who?
I've seen S Club 7 though, and that was dreadful.
Well, they were on the other
Exactly.
weekend.
I know, this was before. This is when there actually were 7 of them. I mean, imagine that. Yeah, before they did their comeback tour. It's going to be a fascinating game because all the storylines from that documentary, no Clausel's, they're not in. So a different French team than we saw in the World Cup. As you mentioned earlier, the philosophical differences on how the game should be played, not on just a...
And who the game should be played by.
Exactly, not on just a stylistic way, but who should be out on the field and who shouldn't be out on the field. It's fascinating. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be the game of the weekend.
The most important thing is the animosity, because it's genuine. We started this podcast talking about had it been maybe manufactured in the running game. This is real. And there are even, the Seb Bashara story where he's playing with England because it's his passion, but he's playing against all his club teammates. That's that mate against mate thing, and it really means something to them. And they wind him up about it, and that's another level of, I don't know, storytelling. It's great. I'm really looking forward to it, and it'll look fantastic on the telly.
Is it true that London will be half professional and have some players that aren't, so need a second job next season, says Kevin?
What they're doing is they're not getting rid of players who refuse to quit their jobs. so they're basically saying if we want you on board and you insist on keeping your job, that's not going to be a deal breaker. So I guess Corey Norman and Dean Vare, those guys, I think they live at Kingston, and I don't think they do other stuff. They just play rugby league.
Have they re-signed them yet? Because that would be a gesture of a statement of intent if they did.
Yeah, or they go back and play in France and
Yeah.
come when the season
Yeah.
season finishes. Yeah, so it was remarkable going to watch them this year. Just the way it built. I think they finished fifth or something, did they?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, watching them win away and then up at Featherstone and then go to France. Well, I had a bit too good a time. I smashed my face up when I got home. Fell face planted when I got home. So that was a day after getting back from the grand final here. But I also think that they've got more of a warm vibe. The Broncos. They've kind of had this, rightly or wrongly, had this perception of being quite a cold kind of club, under-resourced and very pragmatic. And now there is kind of there's just those little things around the edges, the raffle and the
meat raffle.
Yeah, all that like mascot. I know they've always had the mascot, but it just feels like a more welcoming environment when you go there now. And we're talking for as long as they've been around about engaging the expat community down there. I don't think in our lifetime we're going to see it happen on a grand scale. But I come across people who I was at a party with an old friend about 4 months ago, and a fellow there goes, you live there? I go down there. I actually don't mind a bit of rugby league. The guy goes, and I go, really? I've heard of that, And we've been there with them twice now. These guys, and so you do sort of run into sort of little. What would you call it? Bushfires of interest around London, and it's not always. You don't always run into through those people, if you know what I mean. Like I will actually go to the game and occasionally run into someone who's there elsewhere, and that's a good sign. That means that it's not just the diehards,
I put 4 questions up on Twitter earlier, and we've only answered one of them, so that's been good. Matt says, I'm going to Leeds. What I would say is, if the players can't be bothered, it means it. Although some enthusiasm when I saw how many players were, quote-unquote, injured, which goes back to what we were saying earlier. I mean, Kevin, off his point, he always also, Kevin's point about the professionalism at London. We've now got women professionals at York. They'll be bloody voting next. In that programme from 1982, the only woman you see in there is the one promoting the shirts, and she hasn't got any shorts on. The RFL couldn't find some shorts for her. She's just there in her pants.
Remember they used to, when they made a new signing or they announced a test series, they just used to have these models.
Here's a girl
models
on Martin Fire's shoulders.
The Silk Cut Challenge Cup, when they had the Silk Cut girls, didn't they, when the teams walked out?
Giving out free cigs. In things you can't do.
Free what?
Cigs.
Oh, right, okay.
Was there really a cultural clash there?
Oh dear. But yeah, so York are paying players, and people are going, oh, how can they afford to pay players? In the same way that every other club pays players by having owners with money who want to pay them if they
and see the value, because they don't pay them just because they want the money to go down a hole. They can see a commercial return on it at some point, and you get in early. You can dictate that agenda, so I'm fantastic for York to be the first to do that.
What happens next to their rivals? York have put down the marker of intent.
Yeah.
I think we might get a chance to speak to St Helens player tomorrow, so that'd be an interesting question to ask them.
Well, they're going to have to decide how they want to respond to that, but it does take the game up to another level. It might rule out some of the players, and again, that could be an issue. But also, if you're serious about improving the standard, and it goes back to how are we ever going to compete with the Kiwi Ferns and Jiddleroos on what we saw this week, that's exactly the kind of gap that we've got to close.
Well, I think we're also talking about professionalising.
Interesting to talk to Georgia Roach tomorrow about how she's found that difference, whether she's automatically a better player because she's now a paid professional, or what it's allowed her to do being a paid professional that's made her a better player.
They still will have jobs in the real world as well. I don't think York are paying them hundreds of
No, that's the other thing. They won't be paying them enough to give up everything, but they may well now be able to train 4 times a week instead of 2.
They improve match officials when they went full time.
That's the perennial debate, isn't it? It certainly makes it logistically far easier, not having to juggle a full-time job and then get to a game on a Thursday night or a Friday night and then go into France on a Friday and being away all weekend. I mean, that will be very difficult these days, I think, to not have full-time officials. But it's certainly improved the fitness levels, and I would suggest the consistency. I think, going back pre-full-time era, there's probably greater levels of inconsistency between performances.
Imagine what they were saying about the ruck speed then. But before I forget, I think this is the last thing. 5 minutes sin bin, pointless, isn't it?
We mentioned this last week, didn't we, about the NRL looking to introduce a 5-minute sin bin. I don't know the ins and outs of it and why you would introduce only a 5-minute sin bin.
And what
3-point tries is the other one they're thinking of. 3-point tries.
What?
3-point tries.
I'm just saying we've already done it. Why do we keep doing things we've already done? It started off as 5 and 10.
3-point drop goals.
Yeah, it started
So you'd have 5-minute sin bins and 10-minute sin bins?
I don't know. I just
5 minutes must be for certain offences.
I don't know. I'd have to look at the ins and outs of it, because I think there is merit in what they do in rugby union, where they yellow card somebody and review the offence and then red card them.
Why not introduce breakaways and lineouts as well?
We used to have them.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like
rickets.
You know when you've got new officials in the game, when they come up with bright suggestions and they're things that we already did. You know what I mean?
The thing is, and I said this, I don't know if we mentioned it on the podcast last week or not, but in the NRL they have the Innovation Committee or whatever it's called, and therefore by its simple existence they have to come up with harebrained ideas. Ideas.
Otherwise you can't claim for your meal.
Yeah,
absolutely. You can't claim for your mileage.
Yeah. It doesn't exist if you don't come up with an idea.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a kicker 20-40?
I think we've had one over here.
Is that still a rule, by the way?
I think
but if you're kicking it at Odsal or somewhere like Dewsbury or Castleford, you have a better chance of doing it.
Don't mention Odsal. Well, you've done that today.
You know the Colin Sanders, who was the CEO briefly of Super League Australia. His idea was to have the wooden bowl between the team that finishes last there and the team that finishes last here. That's a sort of innovations that you have at these meetings. You could do some. Who would have won the wooden bowl every year since 19?
Well, that would be something for London to aspire to.
Surely we must be days away from Eddie Jones being linked with a job in the NRL again, surely.
Yeah. Well, they had a name for it at least. We don't have a name for the trophy for this series. It's on now, do we? You know.
Are the women on decent money in the NRLW? Well, ask them, Kevin. Ask George. How much money are you on, George?
Well,
it's a fiver.
Yeah, they are.
A 5-year contract.
It's a short season though, isn't it? So it can't be enough to survive on all year round, is it? It's
I wouldn't
short-
even hazard a guess.
What's the cost of living in Australia?
It's pretty expensive.
Yeah, it's
I
more than
had
here,
a
I would
feeling
say.
it was $30,000.
All right, yeah. Well, you can't live on that.
No.
For 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Then do something else. You must have some offer on something, Steve.
No, I didn't think of anything. It's.
I mean, just ongoing anyway.
I should have.
She didn't sell the Wakefield Review shirts.
No.
No. But I mean, there's been an ad in the program the last 2 weeks, so it's I think it's 15% off all Tonga and England with the checkout code program. I should do one, but then I have to get on the. If I do one now, if I put one out there, I'd have to remember to get on the website and put the coupon. Okay, the coupon code. Let's see, what do we do? We'll do 10 quid off Tonga jerseys. Give me time to get on the computer afterwards. 10 quid off Tonga jerseys with the checkout code Richard Shaw Wright.
Well, the people can't spell my name, so that's
No apostrophe.
40,
One
20,
word, no.
40-20 live is easy.
No. You've got to make it hard. Oh, it's 10 quid. Hard-earned money. Richard Shaw Wright. You've got to be able to spell it. No spaces and no hyphens. Then it'll be 10 quid off a Tonga jersey. There
no
you go.
hyphens, just like mine.
I've missed a golden
With the
opportunity.
first man on the side.
To be honest, when you posted the Santa, I wasn't sure if it was
Tom and
you.
Santa.
Yeah, I thought maybe you dusted your hair down and your beard down.
We had great
Put the
fun.
sunglasses.
There is a group of former Radio Yorkshire employees on WhatsApp, and I immediately sent, "Here's Ken Bates," and they all immediately laughed at me. So,
I should have actually had a list of things I wanted to plug, but when I walked in here,
I mean, you must have a.
I'm out of
is this
practice.
not part
I'm
of your
out of
book tour?
No, we still
Is
haven't done.
that
There's two
book
towns
finished?
I haven't done Sheffield or Bradford yet for the Super League teams from '97. So I still want to do launches there, and I'll probably be the audio book. But also there's
an audio book.
There will be. They'll give me. I'll launch it starting next year. But also there's some got movie option when I was in Australia. 2 Tribes. So there's a reasonably well known director and a reasonably well known actor / producer working on it. The last thing they've come back to me with is that they have to sort of fictionalise it. So you have to come up with like John Quayle will become John Partridge or something. You know what I mean? It'd be like, you know.
If it's like that Kerry, I enjoyed the Kerry Packer one. I think was that made by Nine? I don't know. BBC 4 show.
Yeah,
that was really
they haven't told me the reason for that because obviously there was body line and all these there was first kangaroos, which was there were palm trees in
Are
Bradford.
they still alive?
Yeah, I think that might be it.
Probably it.
Yeah, Kerry Packer. Was he like? Yeah.
Did Dennis Waterman sing the theme tune of that?
Yeah, so there's that to plug. Also, if anyone's watching in Oceania, particularly New Zealand,
Kazakhstan, we've got big in Kazakhstan.
We're showing with thanks to Rodri at Rugby League Commercial, Nova Sports, which is me and Jimmy Smith. We're streaming the third test into New Zealand, and also as of today, also the women's and wheelchair into all of Australasia and Oceania. So that's pretty cool. If you want to watch that, it's only $4 Aussie, which is less than a coffee, I think. So that's pretty cool. Really excited about that. So yeah, I did have things to plug. Richard, thanks for reminding me.
The 55th biggest rugby podcast in New Zealand on the Apple charts last week. 77th in Australia, but for the Australians, we've got loads of podcasts now. So
And talking to Sheffield, they're looking for a new medium.
I saw that. Yeah,
So if
paying quite well,
any of our viewers fancy getting into the rugby league side of media,
pro rata paying more than I was paid at a Super League club.
Sheffield Eagles,
Probably didn't
John
deserve as
Davidson,
much.
he lives there.
he could do that.
Getting back to rugby league full time from the modelling
well,
gig he's got.
How's he going to put Sheffield Eagles stories in the chicken wing? Though he's going to have to fictionalise them like your book. I wasn't when you were talking.
That has happened. I've heard before that has happened with someone who was juggling media managing and independent journalism, and that there tended to be suddenly in the gossip column there was a lot from the club he was media managing. We're not going to go identify.
We are a fan.
Are we?
Well, you're going to tell us.
And I wasn't laughing when you were talking about
It's hearsay. I'm not going to
selling options on the book. It just reminded me of other people who said, "Oh, they're going to make a movie of my," and they never did. But there you go.
No, apparently like one in 400 gets made.
I have more faith in you than the other people. Thanks for joining us, Dave. You're around in Yorkshire all week, then you'll be there on Saturday.
Yeah,
and Sunday.
I'm staying up all week and going to all those matches now, and